From WisPolitics in Madison, you're listening to Capital Chats.
It's Capital Chats. I'm Megan Woolard, a reporter for WisPolitics. This week I spoke with Dylan Helmenstine, member of the Wisconsin Heights School Board running for state treasurer. He's set to face off against Marathon County Supervisor Yiling Zhang in the August 11th Democratic primary. I talked with Dylan about managing state trust funds, increasing the state treasurer's visibility, and how he plans to serve in the role if elected. I hope you enjoy. Yeah, thanks again for joining us this morning.
No, like I said, Megan, it's a pleasure to be with you. I'm excited to talk about the treasurer's race and my vision for the office. So,
yeah, of course. I wanted to just start off and ask, you've had some experience as a local elected official.
that's
Why
right.
decide to run for state treasurer?
Well, so on top of being a school board member and village board trustee, moved there after I got my master's but moved back home to my hometown in Black Earth, Wisconsin after I got my master's in public affairs. I was also financial analyst and auditor for Wisconsin Medicaid programs. And through those roles, I was also president of the EMS district for my community and have been appointed by the governor to the Teachers Retirement Board of Wisconsin. And so there's been a lot of ways I've worked with people in my own community and folks from across Wisconsin trying to move my community forward and move communities across Wisconsin forward with good quality education, reliable services that people want to know are going to show up with the money I'll send in. And yet when you try to get that done in Wisconsin, you realize that we've got some very broken systems at the state level that are holding all Wisconsin communities back. And I point to the school funding system being absolutely broken, shared revenue being broken in Wisconsin, that is really picking winners and losers in Wisconsin. And I think we need a state treasurer that is working to highlight how these systems are broken, bring in transparency and a more understandable way to approach these programs so that we can then start moving together on how we're going to reform them and move Wisconsin forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, this is the only statewide office that Democrats, lost last election cycle.
Yeah.
How do you convince Wisconsin voters that a Democrat is right for this office?
So it's a really good question, and I think this is a time and this is an election about doing more for the people of Wisconsin. Folks, I think, are sick of leaders getting elected and then not doing anything for their families or not doing anything for their communities. And what we have is an incumbent state treasurer that ran on doing just the job description and nothing more, and certainly acts that way in office. And I don't think people are going to accept that. And if you're getting a full-time salary from the people of Wisconsin, you've got to be doing full-time work for the people of Wisconsin. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in my campaign for state treasurer. And that's what I am talking about in outlining what this state treasurer can do to really help our communities and help Wisconsinites get control again.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of a good segue to my next question here. I was hoping we could talk a bit about, the visibility of this office.
Yeah.
There was even a push to get rid of it at one point. How
Right.
do you go about informing Wisconsinites of the role of state treasurer and its importance?
So I go to one of the folks who was most recently state treasurer that really used the office effectively, Sarah Godlewski, who fought to save the office in 2018 and was one of the folks who rallied 62% of Wisconsinites to vote to keep the state treasurer's office because she saw the value in this office in the same way Wisconsinites did, a directly elected position that folks are looking for accountability and transparency in government from. And so I want to bring the energy of Sarah Godlewski back to the state treasurer's office. And that just means we're going to have a state treasurer that is not at the state capitol as much as they are throughout the state of Wisconsin. One of my priorities is to work to make government more understandable, bring government back to the people. We have a lot of information out there. It is written for lawyers and consultants and legislative aides, not for voters. And we need a state office that works to make that information more understandable for folks. But as I'm working to make government more understandable so folks can see where these programs are broken and holding us back, it will be local leadership and community leaders who will be defining the ways that we can fix these systems. And that's what we also need to elevate. And so that's why I'll be a state treasurer, traveling the state of Wisconsin to have these conversations and make sure we're elevating the work of the people on the ground floor who are seeing exactly where we're leaving people behind and where communities are getting stuck with these broken systems.
Mm-hmm. I did want to ask you, you had previously, kind of have said you want to use the state treasurer's office to crack down on fraud and corruption. Can you talk a bit more about like what you mean by that and how you plan to fight it?
Sure. So I think what we need in Wisconsin is a statewide elected position that is working towards that, that is elected by the people. And we can look to our neighboring states, Iowa and Minnesota, for examples of this type of role, an anti-corruption role. In Iowa, they have a state auditor position that is elected by the people that works to ensure state departments and government are staying compliant with state law and the constitutional law of Iowa. And then in Minnesota, the state treasurer works to ensure local government is staying compliant with state law and financial expectations for their residents. And unfortunately, we know in Wisconsin that there are some places where the local government might still be controlled by the old boys club. And we still know that every Wisconsinite, no matter where you live, deserves to have a transparent, accountable local government that is answering to the people and not any other special interests or personal interests of a politician. And I think that is going to be a project to reestablish the state treasurer role in that light. And I'll be looking to Iowa and Minnesota to see where we can rebuild the trust in the state treasurer's office that it will have the capacity to then fulfill that role. And I think it's a long-term project for that. And the priorities I outline right now for my first term are things that we can get done to start demonstrating how valuable that work will be for Wisconsinites to then start really restructuring the office. And we can do my priorities without more state laws changing or statutory authority.
hmm Kind of on the vein of authority, as a state treasurer, you obviously would play a role in managing state trust funds.
Yes.
How would you go about handling these funds and, kind of working with the other electeds to manage them?
Yes, so the state treasurer helps to oversee the state trust funds within the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands. It is the state's oldest agency created in the Constitution. The biggest trust fund within that agency is the Common School Trust Fund. There's $1.6 billion in assets in there right now, and it's an example of using public power for the public good because the money in this fund gets invested and used to provide low-cost loans through the state trust fund loan program to our local governments so we can afford to buy the fire truck, rebuild Village Hall, or secure the entrances of our schools. And the incredible part about that is when the money comes back from the loans, it comes back for the investments. It doesn't go to some out-of-state bank on Wall Street or to a big corporation for profit. Instead, that money gets invested into our communities through something called library aid, delivering not the greatest amount of funding, but some stable funding to our schools and something that our school districts can rely on. So it's critical that the Common School Trust Fund remains always for our communities and for our students. Now, in the past, we've seen a Republican Party try to get rid of the state treasurer's office and go after the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands as an agency in an effort to get their hands on this money. And that is both against what the constitutional purpose is of the Common School Trust Fund, but against what the people of Wisconsin want. And so with my role being a governor's appointee to the Teachers Retirement Board, which helps to oversee $155 billion for the public pension fund for our public educators and public employees in Wisconsin, I know how we can keep political interference away from such an important trust fund like the Common School Trust Fund. But I also know that to effectively invest that much money and to be able to achieve all the missions that the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands has, we do need the capacity and the expertise at that agency to be good stewards of that money. And so I want to be a state treasurer that has the experience of how we have effectively built this public pension fund for the retirees in Wisconsin, and how we can do the same type of infrastructure building so that we have that financial system and support for the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands.
hmm I mean, you even mentioned this in your last answer here, but I've heard you say using public power for the public good quite a bit.
Absolutely.
Would you mind, expanding more on like what that means and what public service, in a larger sense means to you?
Oh, what a great question, Megan. Thank you. So public power for the public good is a critical thing that I try to say as much as I can across Wisconsin, because I think what Wisconsinites feel and what I have felt being a local elected official and working in Medicaid as somebody trying to keep our program focused on delivering quality health care and not big profits to companies is there have been so many ways that our systems, our programs, our funding systems have been purposefully built to deliver profits and unfair power to special interests and out of state corporate interests over our systems and over our communities. And I am not anti-business. I think business is a great way to build up a livelihood and move communities forward. But we have to make sure that a business has our people and our communities at play. And my favorite conversations I had was down in Platteville with a resident who used to live in one of the communities up north with mill town, with a lumber mill and paper mill. And she said that back then the business cared for everybody in the community because they saw the long-term health of the community as good for their long-term business. We don't have that in Wisconsin now, and it's been decades in the making to get to this point where we've restructured government to try and deliver higher profits to companies that send those profits to Wall Street instead of reinvesting them in our communities. And it's time we get back to a Wisconsin where we are using our elected positions, the public power of government when necessary and appropriately on behalf of the people and not private interests.
Mm-hmm. And then kind of my last question here. I mean, you've talked a lot about making government understandable and
Yes.
more for the average person. Would you mind talking a bit more about how you would practically do that, if elected to this office?
Absolutely. So when I was working as a financial analyst and auditor in Medicaid, I built up a database for a $1 billion program with 27,000 participants, over 50,000 providers, and used that database to then code and create a dashboard to demonstrate how money was flowing through a very complicated program with a lot of moving parts. And I saw how impactful that was for the experts in the system to see visually what's going on. And fundamentally, I think that in Wisconsin, the voters are supposed to be in control. And so if this type of visual tool can be so impactful for the experts trying to execute the laws of the people, then we should deliver that type of tool and that type of transparency and understandability to the people themselves so that they remain in control of state government and local government. So that's why I talk so often about building a visual public dashboard of the state budget. I think it's critical to give folks 21st century technology tools to keep government accountable, to the wishes and the demands of the people. Right now, we have public information out there that is not written for us. And I tell people, like, I have a master's in public affairs, a degree in economics. And yet when I got elected to the school board, even I was confused by the budget and the information. And so we need to make publicly available information publicly understandable and make sure we are focusing on the people being able to be in control through understanding what's going on. And I think the state treasurer role has a huge role to play in that. And we can also do it through delivering property tax transparency. Across Wisconsin, folks are paying property taxes, and a good portion of that is going to a private voucher system instead of to their public schools. And yet your property tax bills look like all of that money is going to the public school when it's not. So we need to work to bring that type of basic transparency and understandability to the property tax bill where people expect it. And we can do that at a local level and use the state treasurer's office to give those efforts more credibility and energy until the state legislature can work to get that done at the state level.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dylan, that was kind of the last of the set questions I had. Is there anything else you would like voters to know about you before they head to the polls on August 11th?
Well, sure. And Megan, again, I really appreciate the time to talk with you. I would just talk about, in January, I rallied the school boards of Wisconsin to demand that our state be a partner in funding our schools, especially related to special education, after we learned that we were going to be drastically underfunded for school districts. And it was emergency resolution. We had to jump through a lot of hoops to get it to the floor. But at the end of the day, I got 93% of school boards to vote with us on demanding that type of accountability from the state government. And that is because we were able to focus on our common values. And when we did that, we pulled rural and urban and conservative and liberal school boards together to focus on our common value of educating our kids. And in this role for state treasurer, we're going to need somebody who can clearly communicate in all parts of Wisconsin what we need to see from our government to help our people, and that can build coalitions and use levers of power where most people don't see them. And I have a track record of doing that. So not only in January did I build that coalition, I turned it around, and a few months later, I built the largest coalition of elected officials in Wisconsin endorsing my campaign because they've seen me do that work. I'm endorsed by Representative Mark Pocan, Senate Minority Leader Diane Hesselbein, and over 90 other elected officials across Wisconsin, across the ideological spectrum, because they know me, they know my work, and they know that as your state treasurer, I'm going to be working on your behalf to move Wisconsin forward using public power for the public good and getting things done for our communities so that we're safer and more successful.
Well, Dylan, thanks again for taking some time to chat this morning.
I appreciate it, Megan, as always, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you again to Dylan Helmenstine and to you, the listener. For West Politics, I'm Megan Woolard, and this has been Capitol Chats.